Chukwudi had everything a man could ever dream of. He was a billionaire CEO, the owner of great companies, tall buildings, and expensive cars. His name was known across the city, and people respected him wherever he went. But behind the walls of his big mansion, his life was far from happy. His heart was heavy, and his home was filled with silence. His wife, Amora, was beautiful and admired by many. She wore the finest clothes and walked with pride. But her heart was not with Chukwudi. She loved his money, not him. She loved the life of glamour, parties, and friends who praised her. She cared little for her husband's feelings. When Chukwudi came home tired from work, she would hardly look at him. Instead, she spent her time shopping, gossiping, or planning the next party. To her, Chukwudi was only the man who provided wealth. Chukwudi noticed the emptiness growing between them. He tried to make their marriage work. He bought her gifts, took her on trips, and even reduced his work hours to spend more time at home. But no matter what he did, Amora remained distant. She seemed to enjoy everything in the world except his company. At night, he would sit alone in his large living room, staring at the walls, wondering how a man so rich could feel so poor inside. In the middle of this unhappiness, Chukwudi's eyes began to notice someone else in the house. Adiz, the maid, moved quietly in the background. She was a young woman from a poor family, and she had taken the job to support her younger siblings. Every morning, she woke up before the sun and worked until late at night. She cleaned, cooked, and carried out every task with patience. Unlike Amora, she never complained, never demanded more than what was given to her. Adiz had a calm spirit. She greeted everyone with respect, even those who ignored her. When others scolded her unfairly, she bowed her head and answered softly. She did not have fine clothes, yet she carried herself with dignity. Her kindness was simple, but it was real. And slowly, Chukwudi began to notice that in the middle of his cold home, Adiz's presence brought a strange warmth. One evening, Chukwudi returned home late. His wife was gone, attending another party. He walked into the kitchen and saw Adiz washing plates. She looked tired, but as soon as she saw him, she greeted him with a smile. "Welcome, sir. Would you like something to eat?" Her words were gentle, not forced. For a moment, Chukwudi stood still, surprised. His wife had not asked him that in years. That night, he thought about her smile. It was not a smile born from wealth or luxury. It was a smile born from a kind heart. He found himself watching her more closely in the days that followed. He saw how she helped the gardener when he struggled with heavy loads. He noticed how she gave part of her small salary to buy fruits for her younger siblings. He heard her singing quietly while she worked, her voice filled with hope despite her simple life. Chukwudi's heart stirred in a way he had not felt in a long time. For years, he had been surrounded by people who only wanted his money. But here was someone who asked for nothing, yet gave everything she could in her own small way. He found himself staying longer in the kitchen when she worked, asking simple questions. "How is your family?" he would ask. And she would answer with honesty, telling him about her struggles, her dreams, and her faith that life would get better one day. Amora began to notice the small changes in her husband. He no longer chased after her to attend parties. He no longer argued when she spent money carelessly. Instead, he became quiet, thoughtful, and sometimes distant. She did not realize that his heart was already searching for something she could not give. Chukwudi himself was confused. He was a man of power, a man who could buy anything. Yet, in the presence of Adiz, he felt something money could not buy: peace. The way she carried herself reminded him of what he had once dreamed of in a partner: kindness, humility, and true love. It was then he realized that all the riches of the world meant nothing if the heart was empty. One afternoon, as he walked into the house, he saw Adiz kneeling on the floor, helping a small boy tie his shoes. The boy was her little brother, who had come to visit. She spoke to him with patience, encouraging him to be strong and to study hard. Watching them, Chukwudi felt a deep ache inside. This woman, poor as she was, carried more love in her heart than all the wealth in his mansion. That night, lying in bed, he turned and looked at the empty space beside him. Amora had gone out again. For the first time, Chukwudi admitted to himself what he had been trying to ignore. His home was empty not because of its size, but because of the absence of love. And in that emptiness, it was Adiz's gentle spirit that gave him hope. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, he whispered a quiet prayer, not for more money, not for more success, but for the chance to find true happiness, perhaps in the very place he least expected it. Chukwudi began to notice Adiz more with each passing day. She moved quietly around the mansion, often ignored by everyone, yet she worked with patience and care. Even when other servants teased her for being too simple, she never raised her voice. She carried heavy buckets of water, cleaned the floors until they shone, and cooked meals without ever expecting thanks. There was a certain grace in the way she lived, a strength that came from inside her heart. One evening, Chukwudi was walking through the hall when he stopped at the sound of music. It was not from the radio, nor from any expensive instrument. It was Adi's voice. She was cleaning the floor, a rag in her hand, and singing softly to herself. The song was simple, but it was filled with hope. Her voice carried warmth that touched something deep inside him. Chukwudi stood quietly at the doorway, listening. 4 years, his mansion had been filled with noise, Amora's parties, her friends laughing loudly, the sound of glasses clinking. But none of those sounds had ever reached his heart. This one gentle song, however, brought a real smile to his face. For the first time in years, he felt true joy. That night, when he went to bed, he kept hearing her voice in his mind. It was not the polished singing of a professional, but it was pure. It reminded him of the days before money consumed his life, days when love and laughter were simple. He realized that Adi's spirit carried something his wealth could never buy, contentment. From then on, Chukwudi found himself watching her closely. Not in a way that would frighten her, but in small moments. He saw the way she tied her scarf before beginning work. He noticed how she would share her little food with the gatekeeper if he had nothing to eat. He watched her stay behind after everyone had gone to bed, making sure everything was clean. He admired her silence, her discipline, and her quiet strength. One afternoon, he decided to speak to her. He walked into the kitchen where she was cooking. "Adiz," he said gently. She turned quickly, surprised that he had spoken her name. Most times, the master of the house never bothered to address a maid directly. "Yes, sir," she answered with respect, bowing her head slightly. "You're singing," he said, pausing. "It is beautiful." Adiz's cheeks warmed. "Ah, sir, it is nothing," she said softly. "It is just a song I sing to give myself courage." Chukwudi smiled faintly. Sometimes the smallest songs carry the greatest strength. Then he left, but the words stayed with her for the rest of the evening. As days passed, a bond began to form between them. It was not loud or obvious. It was like a seed quietly growing under the soil. Chukwudi would sometimes linger in the kitchen to ask how her family was doing. Adiz would answer politely, never speaking too much, but her honesty touched him. She spoke of her younger siblings, of how she hoped to give them a better future, and of her faith that life would one day change. Chukwudi admired her courage. Though she had little, she carried herself with dignity. Though she faced hardship, she still believed in tomorrow. It was very different from Amora, who had everything yet always wanted more. One evening, Chukwudi returned home early and found Adiz sitting in the backyard, resting after a long day of work. She was staring at the stars, her face calm. He walked over and asked, "Why do you look at the sky so much?" She smiled gently. "Because, sir, the stars remind me that even in darkness, there is light. It gives me hope." Her words struck him deeply. A simple maid, with no riches, had found more peace in her heart than he had with all his billions. He sat beside her, something he had never done with any servant before. For a while, they both sat in silence, just watching the stars. But Adiz never dreamed that a man like him could love her. In her heart, she knew her place. She was only a maid, and he was the master. She respected him and admired his kindness, but she never allowed herself to hope for anything more. She thought her story would always be one of service and sacrifice. Still, the silent bond between them grew stronger. Chukwudi felt himself drawn to her, not because of beauty or wealth, but because of the gentleness she carried. Every act of kindness, every humble word, every quiet smile stitched something new into his heart. He did not say it out loud, but deep inside, he knew, Adiz had awakened something he thought was long dead, hope, joy, and maybe even love. At night, as he lay in bed, he realized that for the first time in many years, he looked forward to tomorrow. Not for the contracts, not for the money, not for the parties, but for the chance to hear Adiz's voice again, see her smile again, and feel the peace she brought to his lonely home. And though Adiz never imagined it, her presence was slowly transforming the heart of a man who had thought happiness was forever lost. Amora had always been busy with her parties, her clothes, and her friends, but she was not blind to changes in her husband. 4 years, Chukwudi had lived with a quiet sadness, a loneliness that even his money could not hide. But lately, his face looked brighter. There was a calm smile that appeared often, and his steps seemed lighter when he came home. At first, Amora thought little of it, but soon her heart grew restless. She wondered where this sudden happiness was coming from. She began to watch him closely. She noticed how he sometimes left his office early. She saw how he would disappear into the garden or the backyard, places he had never cared for before. One afternoon, curiosity and jealousy took over her heart. Instead of going out with her friends, she stayed at home and followed him quietly. Her heels clicked softly on the floor as she trailed him from a distance. Chukwudi walked calmly into the garden, where Adiz was trimming flowers. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and gold, and Adiz's scarf was tied neatly around her head. She looked up when she saw him, and her face lit with a smile, soft, respectful, and full of peace. Chukwudi greeted her kindly, and the two of them began to talk. Amora's heart burned with anger as she watched from behind a tree. She could not understand how her billionaire husband could waste his time with a poor maid. In her eyes, Adiz was nothing, just a servant meant to sweep floors and wash dishes. But here was Chukwudi, the man she had married, standing in the garden as though the maid was the most important person in the world. Her patience broke. She stepped out of her hiding place and shouted, her voice sharp and full of fire. "So this is where you have been finding your joy, Chukwudi? With this worthless girl?" Adiz froze, her eyes wide with fear. She quickly bowed her head, ashamed, her hands trembling as she held the garden shears. She wanted to run away, to disappear, but her feet refused to move. Amora walked closer, her anger spilling like hot oil. "You, a common maid." Amora shouted at Adiz. "Do you think you belong here? Do you think you can speak freely with a man of his status? You are nothing but a poor girl who scrubs floors. Know your place." Tears filled Adiz's eyes, but she said nothing. She could not fight back. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she wished the ground would open up and swallow her. She had never dreamed of being more than a servant in this mansion, yet now the wife of her master was standing before her, pouring insults like heavy rain. But before she could turn to run, Chukwudi stepped forward. His voice was steady, calm but firm, carrying the weight of a man who had found truth in his heart. "Enough, Amora," he said. His eyes did not leave her, and his words cut through the air. "You will not speak to her like that." Amora turned sharply, shocked. "What? You are defending her? A maid? This is the woman you are standing up for?" Chukwudi nodded slowly. "Yes. I am defending her. Because respect and kindness are greater than wealth and beauty. Adiz has given me something you never could, peace." Amora's face twisted with disbelief. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "So you choose a servant over me? The wife who brought you status, the woman everyone admires? You would throw all this away for her?" Chukwudi's voice grew stronger. "You admire yourself too much, Amora. You think beauty and money are everything. But look around, what has it brought us? An empty home, a cold marriage, a heart without joy. 4 years, I have been surrounded by riches, but I have been starving for love, for kindness, for sincerity. And I found it not in gold or silver, but in a humble maid who carries more dignity than all your diamonds combined." Adiz's breath caught in her throat. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. For so long, she had thought of herself as small, as someone who would never be noticed. Yet here was Chukwudi, the great CEO, speaking words that lifted her from the dust. Her heart trembled, and tears ran freely down her face, not from pain this time, but from the weight of a truth she had never dared to dream. Amora's eyes burned with fury. She wanted to shout more, to insult more, but Chukwudi's firm gaze silenced her. For the first time, she saw that she was losing control, that her husband's heart no longer belonged to her. She turned and stormed back into the mansion, her pride wounded, her steps echoing like thunder. When she was gone, silence filled the garden once again. Adiz stood frozen, her tears falling quietly. She could not lift her head to look at him, for she was overwhelmed with fear and shame. "Sir," she whispered softly, her voice shaking. I never meant to cause trouble. Please forgive me. I will leave this house if it brings you peace." But Chukwudi stepped closer and gently lifted her chin so that her eyes, filled with tears, met his. "No, Adiz. You will not leave. Don't you see? My heart has already chosen you. Not because of pity, not because of weakness, but because of the strength and kindness you carry inside you. You are worth more than all the riches I own." Adiz's lips trembled, and her heart raced as if it would leap out of her chest. Never in her life had she imagined such words could be spoken to her. She had thought herself invisible, someone meant to live in the shadows. Yet now, the man she respected most was telling her that she was the light he had been searching for. The garden seemed to hold its breath as the two of them stood there. The world outside still judged, still whispered, but in that moment, it did not matter. For Chukwudi had spoken his truth, and Adiz, with tears of both fear and joy, knew that her life was about to change forever. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe the impossible, that a maid could be loved, truly loved, by a man who had everything yet chose her heart above all. Chukwudi lay awake many nights, staring at the high ceiling of his grand bedroom. The silence in the mansion was heavy, pressing against him like a burden he could no longer carry. He had lived too long in lies, pretending that everything was fine with Amora, pretending that their marriage still had meaning. But deep inside, he knew the truth, there was no love left. What remained between them was only an empty shell of wealth, reputation, and appearances. One morning, Chukwudi rose early, his face set with quiet determination. He had made his decision. He could not keep living with a woman who cared only for his riches while his heart longed for something pure. He filed for divorce from Amora. The news spread across the city like wildfire. People were shocked. Some could not believe that a billionaire CEO would dare to leave his glamorous wife. Others shook their heads, whispering that he had lost his senses. They called him foolish, saying, "How can a man of his power and status leave a woman of wealth and beauty for a poor maid?" Amora herself was furious. When the papers arrived, she tore them in pieces before throwing them across the floor. Her pride could not take it. She stormed into his office, her voice sharp and trembling. "You will regret this, Chukwudi," she shouted. "You will become the laughingstock of this country. Everyone will turn against you. How can you leave me, your wife, for a servant? Do you not care what people will say?" But Chukwudi's eyes were calm. He had carried this weight long enough. Now his words were steady, like a river that refused to stop flowing. "I do not live for people's opinions," he said. "I cannot keep a marriage without love. Respect and truth matter more to me than riches and appearances. Amora, I will not continue to live in lies. This is my decision." His words struck her like a blow. Amora's pride shattered, and though she screamed and cried, his heart did not change. For the first time, Chukwudi stood firm not as a man of wealth, but as a man who had finally found his truth. News spread quickly. On the streets, in markets, and in offices, people whispered. Some mocked him. Imagine a CEO divorcing a rich wife for a poor maid. He must be under a spell. Others laughed, saying it was madness. But there were also voices of admiration, soft but sincere. At least he chose love. At least he chose kindness. Meanwhile, Adiz was deeply troubled. She had never dreamed of such things. She worked quietly in the mansion, her heart heavy with fear. Each time she heard the whispers from the other servants or the gossip on the streets, her chest tightened. She asked herself again and again, why me? Why would a man like Chukwudi choose someone like me? When Chukwudi finally told her the truth of his feelings, she could not hold back her tears. They flowed freely, like rain falling from a heavy sky. But these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of joy and disbelief. "Sir," she whispered, her hands trembling as she held the edge of her wrapper, I don't understand. I am only a maid. I have nothing to give you. How can you love me?" Chukwudi stepped closer, his voice firm yet tender. "Adiz, you have given me what money cannot buy. You gave me peace. You gave me kindness when I was surrounded by emptiness. You do not see yourself, but I see you. And in you, I have found the love I have searched for all my life." Adiz covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as her tears fell. Never had anyone spoken such words to her. She had lived believing she was invisible, just another poor girl struggling to survive. Yet here was a man who could have chosen anyone, women of beauty, fame, and wealth, yet he had chosen her. Her heart swelled with gratitude, with joy that she could not explain. She knelt slightly, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. "I never imagined this, sir," she said softly. "I never imagined that my small kindness, the little things I did without thought, would lead me here, to love." Chukwudi lifted her gently, refusing to let her bow before him. "Do not call it small, Adiz. What you gave was greater than gold. Do not think yourself less than anyone. From today, know this, you are worthy of love." The world outside continued to whisper and judge, but Chukwudi did not bend to their voices. For the first time in years, he felt free. The mansion no longer felt like a prison but a place where light could shine. And Adiz, with her humble heart and quiet strength, became that light. Though fear and doubt still lingered in her heart, Adiz could not stop smiling through her tears. For she had discovered what she thought impossible, that even in a world of wealth and pride, kindness had the power to open a path to true love. And in that moment, as she stood with Chukwudi, her heart whispered softly, "This is the beginning of a new story." The wedding was not like the ones people in the city were used to. There were no loud parties, no long lists of powerful guests, and no endless displays of wealth meant to impress the eyes. Instead, it was simple, yet beautiful. Chukwudi and Adiz stood side by side, smiling as if they had both found the missing pieces of their hearts. The hall was filled with children from the schools they had begun to support, mothers from the communities they had promised to help, and workers from the company who respected Chukwudi not only as their boss but also as a man who had finally chosen truth over pretense. When the pastor blessed their union, Adiz's hands trembled slightly, and Chukwudi squeezed them with warmth. For her, this moment was like a dream she never thought could be hers. Just months ago, she had been sweeping the floors, cleaning tables, and being insulted as nothing more than a maid. Now, she was becoming the wife of a man who had not just seen her face but her soul. Their life together quickly became a story known throughout the land. Chukwudi used his wealth not for empty pleasures but to build schools where poor children could learn without fear of being turned away. He opened hospitals where people who once suffered in silence could receive care. Small businesses were started to give struggling families a chance to stand on their own feet. At every step, Adiz stood beside him, her heart full of compassion. She never let her new position blind her to the struggles of others. People who had once mocked her now watched in silence, then in awe. In the beginning, some had sneered. "She is still a maid at heart," they whispered. But when they saw her speak kindly to everyone, rich or poor, when they saw her spend her time in villages, listening to mothers and playing with children, their sneers turned to respect. Adiz became more than Chukwudi's wife, she became a symbol of kindness, a queen not crowned with gold, but with the love of the people. Amora, on the other hand, faded into the background. Once, she had been the woman people envied, known for her beauty, clothes, and parties. But without love, her world grew quiet and cold. Friends who had gathered around her when she had wealth and power disappeared. Her laughter vanished, leaving behind only silence. She had thought that money was everything, but now she realized it was empty without the warmth of a true heart beside her. Chukwudi and Adiz did not speak against her, nor did they celebrate her fall. Instead, they lived with peace, showing the world that revenge was not needed when love had already won. Adiz's heart never held bitterness for her former mistress. She chose forgiveness, because she knew anger would only weigh her down. In the years that followed, their love grew stronger. Chukwudi, once lonely in his mansion, now woke each morning with joy, knowing that Adiz's laughter would greet him. She filled the home with music, light, and life. Together, they dreamed, planned, and worked, not for themselves alone but for the good of others. Their marriage became a bond not only between two hearts but also between their wealth and the people who needed it most. Children ran through the halls of the schools they built, their voices rising like songs of hope. Farmers found support to grow their crops. Young women found training to build businesses. Hospitals welcomed those who once had no place to turn. And in every corner of the city, people spoke with admiration. "The billionaire who chose a maid has given us more than we ever dreamed," they said. Yet, for Chukwudi and Adiz, the greatest treasure was not in the buildings, the projects, or even the praise. It was in the quiet moments they shared together, the way Adiz still sang while she worked, the way Chukwudi still smiled whenever he heard her voice, the way their hearts rested in each other's presence. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with shades of gold and red, Adiz stood with Chukwudi on the balcony of their home. She looked at him and whispered, "Do you ever wonder what people see when they look at us now?" Chukwudi smiled and pulled her close. "They see wealth, they see power, they see success. But none of that matters. What matters is that I see you, Adiz. And in you, I found my peace." Adiz's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of joy. She rested her head on his shoulder, her heart overflowing with gratitude. For her, life had turned from hardship into blessing, and all because she had chosen to remain kind when life gave her nothing. And so, the maid who once swept floors became a queen of kindness, standing proudly beside the man who had found real happiness in her heart. Together, they showed the world that true love was not measured by riches, but by respect, kindness, and faith. This was their new life.